And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Monday, March 17th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So we have a lot to cover today. So we're going to start off the show. We will talk about the news that broke late last night as I'm getting ready to go to bed. And that is the Bengals agreeing to contract extensions to not just one receiver, but two receivers. Both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins have agreed to new deals. We will talk about the specifics of those deals, the impact that it has on the Bengals. So that'll be how we start off the show here. Then we will get into talking about what I was originally going to start out with, and that is talking about Kupp signing with the Seahawks over the weekend. We'll talk about the impact of that move. We will get into looking at the bracket for March Madness. Games will start tomorrow. The first 4 games will start tomorrow. And then everything else starts on Thursday. So we'll get into that. So, some of the 16 seeds, 11 seeds haven't been finalized yet. So once those matchups conclude, then obviously I will do my bracket. But yeah, everything starts on Thursday. So we got March Madness starting this week. We also have baseball officially starting this week with the Tokyo Series. We will talk about that in the fourth part of the show with the Dodgers and the Cubs. We talked a little bit about it last week, but I'll get into it more today. Expectations for the Cubs going into year 2 with Craig Counsell as their manager. And then in the final part of the show, we will talk about the Rams. I will do a season overview on their season and, what offseason moves have they made so far and, what are the expectations for them going into next year. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So it was late last night, and you were hearing reports constantly that they were in heavy negotiations with both receivers, the Bengals were. And all offseason, we've really been hearing about Joe Burrow's really been saying, hey, we're going to try to keep all these guys. He made that appearance on First Take, talking about it, that we have the capability of keeping everybody. And all of us on the outside are saying, nah, that's not going to happen. And I've been saying constantly that Jamar Chase is going to stay. T. Higgins is going to be the one that's going to end up getting traded. But that was not the case here. You have both receivers signing back with the Bengals. Now, Jamar Chase, there was no doubt. With T. Higgins, I had doubt. We all had doubt. But in terms of the specifics of the deals, so we've constantly been hearing the phrase highest paid non-quarterback. We've seen Max Crosby get that deal. Then all of a sudden, Myles Garrett gets that deal. And now Jamar Chase gets that deal. So he agrees to a deal that makes him the highest paid non-quarterback. So the specifics of the deal, signs to a 4-year deal. Both deals were for 4 years. Jamar Chase, a 4-year, $161 million contract extension with $112 million guaranteed. And he is coming off of a great season. Won the Triple Crown. He had a career high in receiving yards with 1,700 yards receiving, 17 touchdowns, and now he is locked in through the 2029 season. And as for T. Higgins, didn't get paid as much, but still got a big contract. 4 years, $115 million. Missed some time last year due to injury. He has missed some time due to injury over the course of his career, but when he's on the field, very productive. Even with him missing time, he still had 10 touchdowns last season. And you look at Joe Burrow and his stats when T. Higgins is on the field. So I thought I had him saved here. Oh, here it is. So Joe Burrow with and without T. Higgins last season. So with T. Higgins, the Bengals were 8-4. Joe Burrow's completion percentage was 72%. Yards per attempt was 7.9, and his passer rating was 111.5. That's with T. Higgins on the field. And then without T. Higgins on the field, the Bengals were 1-4. Joe Burrow's completion percentage was 67%. Yards per attempt was 6.8, and his passer rating was 101.8. So the numbers are still good, but obviously they're a lot better when T. Higgins is on the field. Now, is this a good thing? It's good for the Bengals offense. All right, they also re-signed Mike Gesicki, so the offense is still intact. The problem is the defense. That is what the issue was with this team last season. And that is the main reason why they missed the playoffs. Now, they also did get off to a slow start. You know, if they don't lose to the Patriots week 1, how many times have I said it? Both on well, really, I was saying that constantly on the football podcast when I was doing it. But that was the main problem, was the defense. But if you don't lose to the Patriots week 1, they're in the playoffs. And who knows what happens. Now, when you take a look at the cap hits for the Bengals in 2025, when you take Joe Burrow's AAV, Jamar Chase's AAV, and T. Higgins' AAV, it equals up to $115.1 million. The Bengals' entire defense is $79 million. The entire defense, compared to 3 players. That is going to be a problem. The Bengals really have to nail their picks in the draft. They need to go all defense with their draft. Offensive line, maybe. But defense has to be the priority with this draft. Because we could go into next year, and yes, it's going to be great to watch Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and what that offense can do. But that defense is not going to be good. And especially if they're not able to work out a deal with Trey Hendrickson, because now it seems like he's going to be the next guy that they're trying to get a deal done with. And you hope if you're a Bengals fan that they do get it done, so he's able to stick around. But if you end up losing him, that's another guy you have to replace. And unless you nail your draft picks, it's not going to be good. And I don't think if they end up trading Trey Hendrickson, it's going to be hard to replace him because he led the league in sacks. Whoever they draft is not going to lead the NFL in sacks next year. And on top of that, you had Sam Hubbard retiring. Now, I know they re-signed B.J. Hill, so you still have him on the defensive line, but, you need to do more. So, look, both guys deserve to get paid. And the Bengals are a team, they're not accustomed to paying guys, usually. Now, I think they should have just let T. Higgins go from a financial standpoint, and then you try to bring in another receiver that's cheaper, but this was also to please their starting quarterback. Because, if they somehow mess this up for Joe Burrow, where, you let T. Higgins go and then things don't work out with Jamar Chase, well, Joe Burrow's not going to want to play with the Bengals. You think maybe he wants out. Now, that's just speculation. But they got the deals done. Now it's all about focusing on the defense. It really is. And look, if they didn't get off to a slow start last year, they're in the playoffs. Despite all the things we talked about with the defense. But Mike just fell over here. But Yeah, the margin for error was so small for the Bengals last year because Joe Burrow would turn the ball over in crucial moments, and that would be the difference in some of these games. The Chiefs game, sack fumble, return for a touchdown by the Chiefs. Now, the Bengals still had a chance to win that game, but there was that pass interference call at the end. Then you had the Ravens game, the first time. Joe Burrow throws a pick. They end up losing that game. Now, they were up by a couple of scores against the Ravens the second time, and the offense stalled out, and that allowed the Ravens to get back in the game. They end up winning by a point. Bengals went for 2 at the end. They don't get it. The Patriots game is still just a head scratcher. How did they lose that game? But it happens. They cannot afford a slow start next season. They can't. I am worried about this defense going forward. It was something that I thought they would overcome regardless. Like, I didn't go into last year thinking the Bengals defense was elite or anything. But I just thought, they got that playoff pedigree with Joe Burrow. But they got off to a slow start, and they couldn't overcome that, and the defense just did not help them out. Played better down the stretch, but they also didn't play some good teams. I mean, they had the Titans on their schedule. They played the Browns. So, we'll see what happens. But let me know what you guys think, though, about the new deals for T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Let me know in the comments. So, we are going to take our first break of the show. And then when we come back, we will talk about what I was originally going to open up with. And that is Cooper Kupp signing with the Seahawks. We will talk about the impact of that move. I'll give you my thoughts on it when we return. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, and for the second part of the show, we are now going to talk about Cooper Kupp signing with the Seattle Seahawks. So he stays within the NFC West. He played out in Washington during his college days. So, he tweeted out or posted on social media that he's coming home. And the Seahawks, that was a position they kind of needed to address. Now, I thought maybe through the draft they were going to do that. But you did hear some rumblings that maybe, some rumors that maybe he could go to Seattle. And that's indeed where he ends up going. With them releasing Tyler Lockett and trading DK Metcalf, they need another receiver, so they bring in Cooper Kupp. Now, what's interesting is you have Jackson Smith-Njigba, who is going to be the number one wide receiver going into next year. And you got Cooper Kupp now coming in. Now, both of those guys tend to play out of the slot, but I think they'll be able to work that out. The Seahawks needed another weapon. And is Cooper Kupp the same player that he was from a few years ago? No. But I do think, like I say for a lot of these players, because I tend to be on the optimistic side. I think he does have gas left in the tank. I thought when Puka Nacua got hurt in the opener when the Rams were playing the Lions, Cooper Kupp was the guy in that game. He was still making the good catches. He had a big performance. And then, unfortunately, the following week he ended up getting hurt. And that's kind of what's hampered him the last few years is injuries. Now, if he could stay on the field, I think he could still be productive. He could still make good plays. He was really a non-factor for the Rams down the stretch. But in the 2 playoff games that the Rams played, he had a couple of nice catches. Like I said, could still make big plays. It's just not on a consistent basis. And also, it's just Puka Nacua emerged into, now he's turning into a top receiver in the league. And Matthew Stafford was targeting him more. But now going to Seattle, I'm curious to see what Seattle is going to look like next year. Because they traded away Geno Smith. You released Tyler Lockett. You traded DK Metcalf. But now you bring in Sam Darnold. You bring in Cooper Kupp to go along with Jackson Smith and Jigba. You still got the running game with Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. And then they also signed DeMarcus Lawrence on the defensive side of the ball to go along with Ernest Jones, who they re-signed, Leonard Williams. The other young players they got, especially in the secondary with Witherspoon. So, yeah, I'm curious to see what Seattle is going to look like. And the contract with Kupp, these are the specifics of the deal. So it's actually a 3-year deal. It's $45 million. And last season, 710 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns on 67 receptions. The Rams were looking for a trade partner, couldn't find one, so that ultimately led to his release. Now, I was kind of hoping, and I think Rams fans were kind of hoping for this too, that maybe they would say, you know what? Let's try to work something out. We keep you around, and then we have Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Devontae Adams. But they weren't able to do that. So, yeah, now, does this make Seattle better? Yes. I mean, compared to how it looked, before they signed him, it was just Jackson Smith and Jigba and question marks after that. Now, you could say that Cooper Kupp is a question mark coming in because, like we talked about, the injuries and the decline of play over the last few years. But I think Cooper Kupp is going to be a very reliable weapon. I think he could be the safety blanket for Sam Darnold. And, I do think that the Seahawks got better at quarterback. Now, I don't think it was a huge upgrade over Geno Smith. This was a discussion in our production meeting last week, and I said that I thought Sam Darnold was an upgrade over Geno Smith, and most people disagreed with me. Well, pretty much everybody disagreed with me in our production meeting. I do think Geno played well for the Seahawks, but I think at this point, age factor, the seasons that they're coming off of, I think Sam Darnold is an upgrade, in my opinion. I don't think it's significant, but I do think it is an upgrade. Now, there is a scenario where the Seahawks can get out of Darnold's deal after 1 year. They can release him after the 2025 season, limiting the commitment of his deal to $37.5 million. Because the $37.5 million is fully guaranteed in 2025. 2026, it's $27.5 million. $17.5 million guaranteed for injury becomes fully guaranteed. And then 2027, it's $35.5 million, and it's non-guaranteed. But I think with the weapons that Darnold has, and I think the running game, I think this offense is going to be decent. And you look at the division, right? The 49ers, I think, should bounce back. Now, they have released a lot of guys, although they did release Kyle Juszczyk and then re-sign him. But, you said goodbye to Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw. Leonard Floyd, who I think he had 8.5 sacks on the year last year. He's now gone. Charvarius Ward, he ended up leaving in free agency. He signed with the Colts. Their backup tackle, to Trent Williams, Moore, he ended up leaving and signing with the Chiefs. They actually traded away Jordan Mason to the Vikings, which I thought was an interesting trade. I thought they were going to keep him around, but I guess not. So the 49ers are going through some changes. I do think, and they obviously traded Deebo Samuel earlier in the offseason to Washington. So a lot of changes in San Francisco. But I think they're still going to, I think they will bounce back. The Rams, I think, to me, they're still the favorites. They're still the favorites, in my opinion. And we'll talk about them later in the show. Now, obviously, we still have the draft coming up. And then you got the Cardinals, who we talked about last week. I do think it's going to be, it's going to be a tough division, but I do think Seattle's a team, right now you look on paper, I think this is a team that can compete for a playoff spot. And they went 10-7. They went 10-7. And I had them going in reverse. I had them going 7-10. But, Mike McDonald, first year, not bad. Now, I think overall with the offense, I'm interested to see how it'll look. It's because it's going to be different. Jackson Smith and Jigba took a big step forward last year, and now he's going to be looked at as the number one receiver. But it's going to be nice now you have Cooper Kupp on the opposite side. So if everybody's focusing on Smith and Jigba, then you got Cooper Kupp, who could still make plays, like I said. So I still think he's got gas left in the tank. I think he will be productive. He's got to stay healthy. That is the key. If he could stay healthy, I think he can go out there and have a good year. I really do believe that. And he's not going to be the guy. It's Smith and Jigba. So I think that helps him out. And it really all comes down to, and it also comes down to quarterback play too. How is Sam Darnold going to be on his new team? I mean, he left a very good situation in Minnesota. It didn't really seem like, you're seeing reports that, the Vikings wanted to bring him back, and then maybe they want to move forward with J.J. McCarthy. I mean, we're still waiting on, what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, because you're hearing all these reports that Rodgers wants to go to Minnesota, which makes sense because the Vikings, out of the teams that have interest in him or that he has interest in, the Vikings are clearly the best team. And if Rodgers goes there, that gives them the best chance to win. But yeah, it's just, you were hearing conflicting things when it came to Sam Darnold and the Vikings, and whether or not the Vikings wanted to bring him back or not. Now, I kept saying I think he should stay with the Vikings because, he had this career year with them, and they made improvements on the interior of the offensive line because that was, part of the problem in those last two games, even though they did hold on to the ball too long. But I thought that would have made the most sense. But then once the Seahawks job opened up after they traded Geno, then it was like, okay, well, maybe he could end up going there. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. They actually did also sign, besides Cooper Kupp, they also signed Valdez Scantling as well. And I think I brought that up when I went over their season. Because Clint Kubiak is there now. He's going to be the offensive coordinator. And Valdez Scantling was making plays for the Saints. He was like their number one receiver. With all the injuries that they had to Shaheed and Olave and Taysom Hill, Valdez Scantling became that guy. So, I mean, the receiving core is not the greatest with the Seahawks. But I think on paper, solid. And, you also got Noah Fant, the tight end, as well. So, Seahawks are going to be, around that. In my opinion, they could be around that 9-10 win mark next season and be competing for a playoff spot. So, that's my thoughts on Cooper Kupp joining Seattle. I think it was a good move for him, good move for the Seahawks to improve that receiving core. But, we'll see what happens when they take the field next season. So before we go to break, I just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we will take a look at the March Madness bracket. Now, we still have some matchups that got to decide the final seedings with the 11 seeds and the 16 seeds. But we will take a look at all the matchups. We'll take a look at the bracket when we come back from our next break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, and for the third part of the show, we are going to take a look at the March Madness bracket for the 2024-2025 season. It is March. Got a lot of stuff coming up now. March Madness, baseball, NBA playoffs are coming up in about, a month. Same thing with the Stanley Cup playoffs. So it's a good time to be a sports fan. It really is. And, we finished up the conference tournaments, and I just want to say, first off, I want to acknowledge my school, Quinnipiac. They did not win the MAC. They ended up losing to Iona, Rick Pitino's old team. They lost to them. They were 500 all year. That's what they finished with, 500 record. Quinnipiac was the number 1 seed. They ended up losing to Iona. Never had a lead against them in the game, in the semifinals. This is in the AA MAC. And then Iona ends up losing to a team that will be playing to try to get into the tournament. And that's on Wednesday, and that's Mount St. Mary's. So, different Mount St. Mary's, because I know there's the other one that's in already. But Mount St. Mary's, when it comes to the MAC, they finished 4th in the MAC, but they won the conference tournament. So they're playing to be a 16 seed, and they will be playing against the American team, which finished in first place in their conference. So they will be playing on Wednesday. Now, I know I said the American team, and that sounds like, the United States has their own team in this? No, so they'll be playing American on Wednesday. But tomorrow night, you're going to have 2 16 seeds playing against each other. You got St. Francis, who actually finished 16 and 17 on the year against Alabama State. And then at 9:10 p.m. Eastern Time, you got UNC against San Diego State. The Tar Heels against the Aztecs. Now, North Carolina being in, there are people that are not very happy about that because of the year they had. Now, UNC is a team that usually makes a tournament. And it seems like people are saying the committee was looking for an excuse to get them in. And, they lost to Duke in the ACC conference tournament, lost a very close game. And despite, Duke missing Cooper Flag, they were still able to get the win. And Duke was still able to win the conference tournament. And Cooper Flag, he's ready to go when Duke plays on Friday. But yeah, so UNC, if they would have won the conference tournament, then it would have made more sense. But it's because of, they were talking about West Virginia and how West Virginia should have made it over UNC because of some of the wins. West Virginia won against teams like Gonzaga. They beat Arizona. They beat Kansas. They beat Iowa State. I'm looking at some of the other ones. Yeah, I mean, they won against a lot of teams that are in the tournament right now. And UNC, you look at their schedule and who they beat. Again, they had an opportunity to beat Duke. They ended up losing recently, but their best win, I mean, they played Auburn, they played Kansas, they played Florida. They lost all those teams. They did beat UCLA, who's in. They lost to Alabama. But not a lot of signature wins on the schedule. A lot of it came against their own conference. And against their own conference, they went 13-7. So, yeah, I mean, people are saying the committee found a way to get them in. So they'll be playing the Aztecs, a team that did make a run, I think it was a couple years ago in the tournament. But you look at, the first teams that are in, first teams that are out. So you got Texas, Xavier, San Diego State, North Carolina. And then the first teams that were out, West Virginia, Indiana, Ohio State, and Boise State. But yeah, those are the matchups for the first four. Now, when we take a look at the bracket. So, in the South Division, you got Auburn as a number 1 seed, and they've kind of struggled down the stretch here. Florida ended up winning the SEC championship game, and that was against Tennessee yesterday. They ended up winning that. And then, interesting matchup, 8 and 9. You got Louisville and Creighton. Now, I remember a couple years ago, well, really recently, even last year, but no, a couple years ago, Louisville was really bad. And Louisville's, usually a good basketball school. But a couple years ago, they were horrendous. But now they find themselves back in the tournament. They're playing against Creighton. Very entertaining game when they played UConn. UConn, almost pulled off a comeback, but fell a little bit short. St. John's ended up winning the Big East tournament. Congratulations to them and Rick Pitino. He has really, turned that program around. And obviously I'm somewhat in the area, so, there's a lot of hype with St. John's. And Rick Pitino, quick thing on him, first coach in NCAA history to win conference tournaments for 5 different schools. He did it for Boston, Kentucky, Louisville, Iona, and St. John's. Like I said, he's really turned that program around. So, and they're a 2 seed right now. So, yeah, you got Louisville and Creighton. Interesting game to start off. There's a lot of people out there. Well, not a lot, but I know there's people out there taking a look at the next game. You got Michigan, who just won the Big Ten championship, won their conference. That was an ugly game. Michigan and Wisconsin, they both did not shoot the basketball well in the first half in that game. Michigan ended up coming away with the win. Final score of that game, yesterday. That was it was a close game. It was a close game. But they so they ended up winning. Oh wait, where's the game here? I don't know why all the games just went away. But yeah, that ended up being a close game between Wisconsin and Michigan. But yeah, there's people that are taking UC San Diego to knock off Michigan. So, and when it comes to picking upsets, when I first started doing brackets, I would always just pick the higher seeds. I'm going to try not to do that. But so that's one that could be on upset alert. You also got then Texas A&M against Yale. I know from some of the things I was paying attention to, Yale could be a team that upsets A&M. Ole Miss is waiting on who they're going to play as an 11. You got Iowa State against Lipscomb. Marquette in New Mexico. The Lobos, they made a deep run last year. And I had Marquette as one of my teams in my Final Four last year. I had three of my 4 Final Four teams last year. I had Big East teams. Didn't even realize it, but because that shows you how much of an expert I am when it comes to college basketball. But that could be an intriguing matchup. Michigan State, that's a team that I might have going to my Final Four. I might pick them to go out of this side of the bracket. I might take Michigan State to go all the way to my Final Four. So that's the South Division. Then in the West, Florida is the number 1 seed, winner of the SEC. They'll be taking on Norfolk State. Interesting 8-9 matchup. You got the 2-time defending champions, the UConn Huskies. They'll be taking on Oklahoma. They're not the same team. They're clearly not. I might take them to win this game, but if they go up against Florida, I'm probably going to take Florida. Then you got Memphis and Colorado State, 5 in the 12. You got Maryland and Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon advanced a little bit last season. I think I took them again to the Sweet 16, but I think they got knocked out. I think they got knocked out in the next round. But they're a team that's got a lot of seniors on it, so we'll see what happens there. Missouri and Drake. Drake won their conference. That could be a potential upset. Texas Tech and UNC Wilmington. You got Kansas and Arkansas, 2 all-time head coaches going at it in that game. So that'll be interesting. John Calipari no longer with Kentucky now, is with Arkansas. It's weird, but yeah, no, he's there now. And then you got, of course, St. John's against Omaha. Probably going to take St. John's. St. John's is a team, struggles shooting the 3, but and that could be a problem for them in this tournament. They could be a team that they can make a deep run or they get knocked out early. But, good to see them in it. And then on the other side, Duke is the number 1 seed in the East. And then you got 8-9 Baylor and Mississippi State. Oregon and Liberty. Akron and Arizona, that's another one that I saw could be a potential upset. BYU and VCU. I know when I was watching the bracket breakdown on after they announced all the matchups, I know they were talking about VCU being a potential upset for BYU. Wisconsin against Montana. Then you got St. Mary's, not the St. Mary's we talked about in the MAC, but the other St. Mary's against Vanderbilt, and then Alabama is taking on Robert Morris. And then Houston is the number 1 seed in the Midwest. They will be taking on SIU Edwardsville. Got to be honest, not heard of that team before, or that school before. And they will play, and if the winner of that game will play the winner of Gonzaga, Georgia, in the round of 32. Then you got Clemson and McNeese. Clemson's the number 5 seed against McNeese, which is a 12. Purdue is a 4. They were the runner-up last year, 13 against. They will be playing the 13 seed in High Point. Illinois, waiting on who they'll play. Kentucky against Troy. Then you got UCLA against Utah State. And then Tennessee is a number 2 seed against Wolford. So that is the bracket. Now I will, make it once the first four, that gets finalized. But it's going to be fun. It is going to be a fun tournament. I'm going to do my best to try to cover the matchups as we move along. And obviously, you got the women's tournament as well that has started. But really excited. Always love watching March Madness. I know I'm not super into it during the regular season, although I did pay attention to some of the conference tournament games. Some of the bigger games. I watched Alabama and Auburn a couple weeks ago. Some of the Big East games I've paid attention to, and obviously being in the St. John's area, it's cool to see them in. Would have liked to seen the Bobcats from Quinnipiac get in, but once again they fall short. They get knocked out in the semifinals again. So, it is what it is. I thought the women's team had a shot because the women's team also played in the championship game against Fairfield, but they ended up losing. So no representation from my school in it. Maybe next year will be the year, but I've said that the last couple of years. But hey, the hockey team for Quinnipiac won, so at least I have that from a couple of years ago. But let me know what you guys think about the bracket. I was going to talk some NBA, but basically this is what I'll say on the NBA. So LeBron, I think, is going to be out for at least another week. Jalen Brunson is going to be out with his injury. Late March, early April, he could be back. Cavaliers, their 16-game winning streak got snapped yesterday by the Magic. Magic pulled off a double-digit comeback and knocked them off. So that winning streak comes to an end. But look, it's got to give the Cavs credit. This is their third winning streak of this, of this total this year. Or close to this total. So impressive what they're doing. But we will talk about we'll talk some NBA this week. But just with the Bengals stuff kind of changed how I was going to do the show today. So, but let me know what you guys think about the bracket. What are some of your favorite matchups going into the first round here? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our next break, and then when we come back, we'll talk some baseball. We got the Dodgers and the Cubs starting off the season tomorrow. Opening day is tomorrow. I mean, unofficially, I get, well, officially, but not. It's a unique situation with the Cubs and the Dodgers opening up in Japan. Obviously, when we get to next week, season opens up in 10 days, for everybody else. But so we'll get into all that when we come back from our next break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, and for the the fourth part of the show, we are going to talk about the Tokyo series once again. I know I brought it up briefly last week, but what a great start to the segment here. But so the Dodgers and the Cubs will be playing against each other, 2-game set. So it starts tomorrow, very early in the morning, depending on where either way, it's going to be early. It's 6:10 my time in the morning, 6:10 a.m., both days. So how we're going to do it is we'll recap the game the following day. So the game tomorrow will recap on Wednesday, and then the other game will recap. The second game will recap on Thursday because it's very early in the morning, and I will be honest, I'm not going to get up to watch the game. And you're probably like, oh, that's lame. I mean, if I happen to be up, maybe I'll turn it on. I might just DVR it. I think I mentioned that last week. But two very good pitching matchups to start it off for us. So the first game, you have two guys coming into their second season in the major leagues here, in Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Shota Imanaga. And Yamamoto last year, 7-2, 3 ERA, spent some time on the injured list, but was solid and, of course, pitched well in the playoffs. And then last year, for Shota Imanaga, he went 15-3 with a 2.91 ERA. So a very good first season for him with the Cubs. And then the second game, you got Roki Sasaki making his major league debut against Justin Steele. And Justin Steele last year went 5-5 with a 3.07 ERA. He spent some time on the injured list. Actually got hurt first game of the year last year. So two very good pitching matchups. Sasaki, that's something that baseball fans are going to be locked into. How is he going to do in his first start with the Dodgers? Because last year Yamamoto, his first start was not great, but obviously settled in, and look what happened with the Dodgers. So a lot of people are going to be focusing in on Sasaki and what he's able to do in his first start. But I do want to talk about the Cubs a little bit more, because I think this is a big year for them, and I think especially this is a big year for Craig Counsell, because the Cubs signed him to a massive deal. They let go of David Ross, their previous manager, to bring him in, and they were hoping that the Cubs were going to take that next step last year. Now, they ended up finishing 83-79, tied with the Cardinals for second place in the NL Central last year. Brewers ended up taking that division. But this year, the Cubs need to have a good year, in my opinion. You brought in Craig Counsell to be a difference maker. And some of the moves this offseason, the biggest move that they made, now, they traded Cody Bellinger to the Yankees. They got Cody Poteet for pitching depth. But the big move that they made was the acquisition of Kyle Tucker. I think Kyle Tucker is going to have a good season for the Cubs, and he's going to be one of the top free agents, if not the top free agent, going into the offseason. He's going to have a big. You want to hope that he's going to have a big year. I think he will do well with the Cubs. I'm surprised that the Astros traded him. I mean, I guess, they weren't going to get him back. They weren't going to re-sign him. So they figured, might as well just trade him now and get, some assets back for him. So I guess that was their logic. But now, you got Jose Altuve playing in the outfield, which I don't understand. I'm curious to see how that goes throughout the year. But he did, misjudge a ball the other day in the outfield. So I don't know. That move is a curious one for me. But they trade Kyle Tucker. I think he's going to be good. They also got Ryan Presley, who was the setup guy to Josh Hader last year for the Astros. But Presley was their closer for years, and then they got Josh Hader, and that's why Presley was in the setup role. So, we'll see what happens. I mean, for the Cubs, I think, they could definitely compete in this division, the Central, because the Central is not great. I think most people are going to say the Brewers are going to win it again. But, you got the Reds also. I think they could be a better team because now they bring in Terry Francona, which I thought was a surprise. I thought Terry Francona was done managing, but he comes back, and they got a lot of young players on their team. So, I think the Reds could be a problem. The Cardinals, I don't think are going to be very good. They're going to be, they're going to be selling off pieces. I mean, Arenado is definitely going to be on another team by the time we get to the trade deadline. Maybe the Pirates, a full year with Skeens, they could be a little bit better, but I think for the Cubs, this is a big year for them, and they gotta make the playoffs this year. Otherwise, Craig Counsell experiment's not looking good so far. But then as for the Dodgers, I mean, we've talked about them several times since I started doing this show. Actually, one thing with the Dodgers, so I don't know if Mookie Betts is going to be available for this. I think he's dealing with a bit of an illness, I want to say. As I always say, I want to do a quick fact check. So, yeah, so actually, Mookie Betts, so this is on NBC News. So Mookie Betts has lost 15 pounds from lingering illness and won't play in Tokyo. So Miguel Rojas will be starting at shortstop. So we are not going to see Mookie Betts for both of these games. Now, Dave Roberts said on Monday, today, that Betts is starting to feel better, but has lost nearly 15 pounds and still trying to get rehydrated and gain strength. So, yeah, he's really trying to overcome something. Well, hopefully everything's all right, but like I said, Dave Roberts said he's getting better. So, yeah, that's an interesting situation there. But Shohei Ohtani, homered in one of the exhibition games that the Dodgers have played. He's ready to go. Obviously, we're still waiting on him to, get back on the pitcher's mound. We'll see if May ends up happening. The May return ends up happening to the mound, but could be even further than that, further down the line. Dodgers are going to be really good. That's my analysis on the Dodgers. They are going to be really good once again. They signed a lot of guys this offseason and re-signed some guys. They signed Roki Sasaki. They signed Blake Snell. They signed Tanner Scott, one of the top relievers on the market. They signed Kirby Yates. I know they brought in Conforto to be, kind of a depth piece with the outfield. They also signed Ha-Sung Kim, a different Ha-Sung Kim than the one that was with the Padres. So they were busy. They were busy. They brought back Kershaw on a one-year deal. They have a lot of pitching depth. And I think when you see the amount of injuries to pitchers, you can see why the Dodgers have stockpiled so many. Last year, look at how they won the World Series, and it was a 3-man rotation. Now you got all these guys coming back and guys that you signed. You signed Sasaki. You signed Blake Snell. Ohtani's going to make his return to the mound at some point. Tyler Glasnow is going to make his return to the mound. You got Yamamoto, and they got other guys as well. Kershaw, we'll say. And not a knock on Kershaw, but he's kind of going along for the ride at this point, which, I mean, I'm completely okay with that. Clayton Kershaw is one of the greatest pitchers of this generation, and the Dodgers are taking care of him. They're just going to keep signing him to one-year deals, which is fine. He is a Dodger, and he shouldn't be anywhere else. So, got a lot of pitching depth. The lineup, obviously from top to bottom, is going to be a problem for teams. But, are they going to be the first team to repeat since the Yankees? Are they going to be able to do that? They definitely can. It's a long season, though. Injuries are going to come up. I think they should definitely win over 100 games. Should be an interesting 2 games. Obviously, if the Cubs sweep the Dodgers, it's not like, oh, wow. The Cubs are better than the Dodgers this year now. Yeah, baseball, it's a marathon. You're going to have your highs and your lows. And as a Yankee fan, I experienced a lot of that last year. Because you see on social media how everybody loved the team from last year, but I remember in July we were not saying that about that team because they were really struggling. Everybody goes through it. The Dodgers went through a rough stretch last year. Everybody goes through it. It's a long season. And obviously, you got the trade deadline, so the team that you start out with is not going to be exactly the team you finish with, depending on what you decide to do at the deadline, if you're selling or not. But now you have less teams selling because there's more playoff spots up for grabs. So, like I said, we will take a look at these games the following day. Might sprinkle in, you know, what happened in the games during the shows, but yeah, it's overseas, doesn't line up with our times. I mean, 6 o'clock in the morning. That was when I would get up to go to school, and don't do that as much, thankfully. I mean, at some point it will happen again when I have to get up that early. But right now, I haven't had to do that, and there's a thing called DVR, so we're going to do that. So let me know what you guys think, though, about the Tokyo series. What are you most excited for that? Baseball is back tomorrow, and then, of course, everybody will start officially next Thursday, and we will make sure to do predictions for divisions and things like that. So we're going to take our final break of the show now, and then when we come back, we will talk about the Rams, give a season overview on their year, and we'll take a look at what they've done in the offseason. So for one final time today, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, and for the final part of the show, we are now going to do a season overview on the Rams, final season overview for the NFC teams. Tomorrow we will begin with the AFC teams. We'll start with the AFC East. But yes, the Rams, final team here in the NFC that we will cover. It's gone really fast doing these season overviews. So I did have the Rams going 10-7, and I was correct on that. However, I was not correct on who was winning this division. I had the 49ers winning it, and they ended up finishing in last place. So the Rams did go 10-7. They made the playoffs, and they got their season started off in Detroit. And their season began like how it ended. Began with a loss. Now, it was a very entertaining game, week one. But you did have Puka Nacua go down with an injury, and he missed a lot of time, did come back. But Cooper Kupp, who we talked about earlier in the show, in that game he had 14 receptions for 110 yards and a touchdown, and was targeted 21 times. You also had Tyler Johnson. He had 5 catches for 79 yards, former Buccaneer. Stafford had 317 yards passing. They were up 20-17. However, the Lions did get into field goal range and tie the game at the end, and then they got the ball to start off overtime. They went right down the field, and David Montgomery scored the game-winning touchdown. And then Cooper Kupp gets hurt the following week. Rams get blown out 41-10 by the Cardinals. So it wasn't looking good. Was not looking good for the Rams. So when they got to the bye week, they were 1-4. Now, they did beat the 49ers 27-24, and the 49ers, I mean, they just blew that lead, something that they did a lot of last season. You know, they were up 24-14 going into the fourth quarter, and you had Jake Moody missed a field goal in that game late, and, a couple of touchdowns. Actually, Kyron Williams had 3 touchdowns in that game, So he was a key part in that game. But yeah, the Rams, they won by a field goal in that, so they got to 1-2. They ended up losing to the Bears, and they ended up losing to the Packers as well by around the same score, 24-18 and then 24-19. So yeah, 1-4 going into the bye. So things were not looking good for the Rams. They come out of the bye, and then you started hearing rumblings of, all right, we're almost at the halfway point of the season. Are the Rams going to be sellers? Are they going to start selling off guys? Are they going to trade Cooper Kupp? So they ended up getting the win against the Raiders. They won 20-15. And then week 8 comes around against the Vikings. And Cooper Kupp was set to make his return. Then all of a sudden, you were hearing that Puka Nacua could come back. And then he ended up coming back for this game. And the Rams looked like a completely different offense. Because Stafford, up until that point, now he did only finish with 20 touchdowns on the season, but before the Minnesota game, he only had 3 touchdown passes. He had 3 touchdown passes to 4 interceptions. And then he gets Puka Nacua back and Cooper Kupp back, and he had 4 touchdowns in the game. Stafford, 4 touchdown passes. Puka Nacua had 7 receptions for 106 yards, and Cooper Kupp had 5 receptions for 51 yards and a touchdown. Demarcus Robinson had 2 touchdowns, and he recently signed with, I think, the 49ers, so he's not coming back either. So then the Rams get to 3-4, and you're thinking, okay, are they going to go on a run here like last year? And then they win that overtime thriller against the Seahawks. They got helped out a little bit with Geno Smith turning the ball over 3 times, and Matthew Stafford threw that touchdown pass to Demarcus Robinson. He makes that spectacular one-handed catch for the game winner. So the Rams get back to 500. Then you have that Monday night game against the Dolphins. They lose 23-15. The Dolphins defense played really well in that game. And then you were like, oh, that's not good. But then they got back on track. Cooper Kupp had a couple of touchdowns. Stafford threw 4 touchdowns in the game. And Puka Nacua had a touchdown in this game as well. So they get back to 5-5. Then the Eagles come to town. Saquon Barkley has that monster game against them. Well, the first go-around. 255 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. The Eagles, they dominated in that game. So the Rams at that point were 5-6. But what ended up happening after that, they end up winning 5 straight games. They win that close game against the Saints, 21-14. They win in that shootout against the Bills, 42-44. Josh Allen had 6 touchdowns in the game, 3 rushing, 3 passing. Matthew Stafford, 320 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. You had a rushing touchdown by Puka Nacua and a receiving touchdown. He had a monster game, 12 receptions for 162 yards. Kupp had 92 yards receiving and a touchdown. So they get to 7-6 at that point. Then they win that low-scoring game against that ugly low-scoring game on that Thursday night against the 49ers. And Sean McVay said after the game, he said, we could beat you in many different ways. And, yeah, those 2 weeks showed you. They went in the shootout against the Bills, and then they won a low-scoring game against the Niners. Nobody scored a touchdown. Then they go cross-country. They play the Jets. They win 19-9. That was a low-scoring game. That was ugly. Then they beat the Cardinals 13-9. Then all of a sudden you're like, is there a problem with the Rams offense? They rested their starters because then they technically clinched the division. Even though they finished with the same record as the Seahawks, they clinched the division because of strength of schedule. So they did lose 30-25 against the Seahawks. Yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo playing in that game. So their first round matchup was against the Rams, or against the Vikings. But they had to play in Arizona because of the wildfires, and they dominated. Rams defense in that game sacked Darnold 9 times. Matthew Stafford and the offense went right down the field on the first drive. They went up 7-0, and they didn't look back. They were winning 24-3 at the half over the Vikings. And then they went up against the Eagles. Now, Saquon Barkley still had a big game. Well, he had over 200 yards rushing in the game. He had 50 less rushing yards in the game. So he still went off against them. But the Rams had an opportunity to win that game. They did. They got that safety off of Jalen Hurts, sacked him in the end zone late in the game. But a lot of people, and I agree with this, they really had a chance to win that game, and I really do believe had it not snowed, I think they beat the Eagles. I think they beat the Eagles. I really do. But we can't, that's a hypothetical. But they were the team that came the closest to beating the Eagles. They fell a little bit short. You had that unbelievable catch by Puka Nacua down the sidelines that set him up. 3rd and 2. Jalen Carter, play of the game, was sacking Stafford on that 3rd and 2. Because the Rams, I think the Rams pick it up if that doesn't happen. They don't lose yardages. If they don't lose yards on that play, I think they pick it up. And then who knows what happens. Because you thought after Saquon Barkley had that second rushing touchdown, the game was over. But then quick drive, and then they got the Eagles to punt it back to them, and they had a chance. But, they ended up losing. And now going into the next season, the biggest move that they've made, signing Davante Adams. I think he is going to be a great fit for this offense. Him and Puka Nacua. Davante's going to be wearing 17. Nakua's going to be wearing 12. They worked that out. So you got those two guys at receiver. You're getting Tyler Higbee back for the whole year. Getting him back late in the season, that was big for them. Got Kyron Williams running the football. They did re-sign Tutu Atwell. I think maybe, Whittington is another guy that could, have a bigger role this upcoming season. But, and they were able to work things out with Matthew Stafford. But the defense struggled in the beginning of the year, but they really turned it around. They got some good young players on that side of the ball, in Verse and Fisk. So, this is going to be a very good team in 2025. They're trying to win it all again. And, they got one of the best head coaches in the NFL in Sean McVay. Matthew Stafford showed you that he could still play at a high level, especially when he has, his requisite weapons around him. Because, when you're missing Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, I mean, it's hard to navigate through that. And especially with the offensive line, because the offensive line also struggled, early on in the season last year with the injuries that they were dealing with too. Because in the opener, it was injuries galore. A lot of guys were going down. Puka Nacua obviously getting hurt. And thankfully, he was able to come back, and he turned in a good season. Not as good as, his rookie season, but it's okay. He's going to come back, and he's going to be even better next season, if he stays healthy. Because he finished 10 yards short of 1,000 yards. Missed all that time. But he finished with 990 yards and 3 touchdowns. Kyron Williams had a very good year, fell yards shy of 1,300 yards. He had 14 rushing touchdowns on the year. Stafford, only 20 touchdowns to 8 picks. I expect the number to go up, especially when you're adding Davante Adams. And you're getting Tyler Higbee back for a whole year. And then on the defensive side of the ball, looking at the sack leaders. So you had Kobe Turner. He had 8 sacks on the year. Byron Young had 7.5 sacks. Brandon Fisk had 8.5 sacks. And Jared Verse had 4.5 sacks. Had 2 forced fumbles on the year, 66 total tackles. The leading tackler on the team was Christian Roseboom. And then interception leaders, Cameron Kinchins, he had 4, and one of them was a pick 6. That was off of Geno in the game in Seattle. And you also had Jalen McCollum. He had 4 interceptions as well. I definitely mispronounced his name. I apologize for that. But that's a season overview of the Rams. So 10-7 last year. I was right on that. I was right on the money with that, but I did not have them winning the division. I had them being a wild card team. So that is the final overview for the NFC teams. We will start the AFC teams tomorrow. So make sure to tune in for that. We pretty much do them towards the end of every show. So, we are moving right along here. Hopefully, maybe we get some more news on the Aaron Rodgers front or the Russell Wilson front. We're still waiting for them to sign. There's some other free agents out there besides the quarterbacks that haven't signed yet. Stephon Diggs, is a guy that still hasn't been signed yet. So, hopefully we get some more news on that front. But I hope you guys enjoyed the show today. We covered a lot. Basketball, football, baseball. We got March Madness and baseball starting. So I'm really looking forward to that. The first games for the tournament start tomorrow. And, then we also got the Tokyo series as well. And like I said, hopefully we get some more news on the remaining free agents in the NFL. But yeah, that is pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well. We got some new faces that you'll be seeing over the course of the next, couple of weeks. So make sure to tune into those shows as well when you see them. Make sure to leave a like and comment on our videos, and I'll try to respond to them. And also subscribe to both YouTube channels as well. So until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet.